You're 38. Your friend just bought a house. Your coworker casually mentioned their 401k balance like it was no big deal. Then last night, you looked at your own number and your stomach dropped. But here's the part. Almost nobody realizes the number you're stressing over, it's probably not the one that actually matters. There's one metric that predicts your financial future better than your salary, better than your net worth, even better than your job title. And almost nobody ever checks it. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly where you stand. And more importantly, the first thing you should fix. But first, why does turning 40 suddenly feel like a financial deadline? 40 isn't random. Psychologists have a name for what happens around this age. Carl Jung called it the second half of life. It's the point where your brain naturally starts asking, did I build the right thing? So if you're feeling that pressure, you're not imagining it. It's not weakness. It's not you falling apart. It's just what brains do at this stage of the game. But here's the part that makes it worse. Compounding has a runway. And that runway is visibly shrinking. Put $10,000 into the market at 30, and by 65 at a normal average return, that turns into roughly $148,000. Put that same $10,000 in at 40 instead, and you end up with about $68,500. Same money, same market, half the outcome. That's the gut punch stat. But here's what that chart doesn't show you, and stick with me, because we're coming back to this later with numbers that are going to feel a lot better. For now, just know this. That gap looks brutal, but it is not a verdict. It's a checkpoint. The real problem isn't the 10 years. It's that most people are about to make this feeling worse by comparing themselves to the wrong number entirely. And that number, it's the first thing we need to kill. Almost everyone, when they think about, am I doing okay financially, lands on the same word, net worth. So let's talk about it, because the way most people think about this number is broken. Here's the average net worth for someone in their 40s, $547,400. Feels bad already, right? Because you're probably not there. Almost nobody is. Here's why. That number is the mean, and means get dragged upward by a small number of extremely wealthy people. The number that actually reflects a typical person your age is the median, $135,600. That's not a rounding error. That's a $400,000 gap caused entirely by a handful of outliers pulling the average into the stratosphere. And it gets worse before it gets better. Charles Schwab ran a survey asking people what net worth qualifies as wealthy. The answer people gave, $2.2 million. So think about what just happened. The typical person is sitting around $135,000, but the number they've been mentally measuring themselves against is $2.2 million. No wonder everyone feels behind. They're not behind. They're using the wrong ruler. If you want an actual target instead of a fantasy one, here are two simple ones finance people use. 3 times your annual salary or your age times your income divided by 10. Not a verdict, just a rough marker to see where you're standing. And one more thing worth clearing up, because this trips people up constantly. Net worth isn't cash in the bank. It's assets minus liabilities, everything you own minus everything you owe. Your house, your retirement accounts, your car, minus your mortgage, your loans, your credit cards. That's the real number. But here's the thing that number still doesn't tell you. There was a post on Reddit from a man named Kevin, someone with a $1.2 million net worth, who wrote that he still felt behind. $1.2 million still feels behind, which tells you something important. Net worth alone doesn't buy peace of mind, because net worth doesn't tell you anything about what's underneath it. It doesn't tell you how Kevin got there. It doesn't tell you if that number is stable or one bad month away from falling apart. 2 people can have the exact same net worth and be in completely different financial situations. And the thing that separates them isn't what you'd expect. It's not how much they have. It's what's sitting underneath it, quietly shaping everything, the part almost nobody thinks to check. Meet Anna and Ben. Same salary, same job title, same age. If you looked at their paychecks side by side, you'd assume their financial futures looked identical too. They don't. One of them is on track to retire comfortably. The other is going to be working well into their 60s, wondering where it all went. Same income, wildly different outcomes. So which one do you think ends up ahead? Here's the twist. It's not about how much debt either of them has. It's about what that debt is actually doing. Because debt isn't one thing. There's debt that builds your future, and there's debt that quietly drains it. And most people never learn to tell the difference. Ben's debt is working for him. A mortgage on a home that's appreciating. A loan that helped him finish a degree that doubled his earning power. That's called leverage. Debt that puts you in a stronger position than you started. Anna's debt is working against her. Credit cards carrying a balance month to month. A car loan on a vehicle that's worth less every year. That's drag. Debt that quietly eats your future income before you even see it. Same word. Opposite effects. And the numbers make the gap real. The average mortgage balance in the U.S. sits around $244,000, but here's the so what. That's debt attached to an asset that historically grows in value. The average student loan balance is around $42,000, debt attached to something that statistically increases lifetime earnings. Credit card debt averages closer to $7,000, and here's the part that stings. At typical interest rates, that's debt attached to nothing except a shrinking bank account. So the question was never, do you have debt? The real question is, what is your debt doing for you or to you every single month? That reframe changes everything because it means someone with a mortgage and a student loan isn't behind, and someone with zero debt but a maxed out credit card isn't automatically ahead. So if debt isn't the real dividing line between Anna and Ben, what is? Because here's the uncomfortable part. Even if you cleared every debt tomorrow, that alone wouldn't guarantee you end up okay. Something else determines that. Something that has almost nothing to do with your bank statement, okay? So it's not net worth. And we just proved it's not debt either, not really. So what's left? Most people's next guess is income. I just need to make more money. It feels obvious. It feels safe. If the number's not big enough, go get a bigger number, except that's not quite right either. And here's where it gets interesting. If you're 40 and you don't feel like you're at your peak yet, good. You're not supposed to be. Peak earning years for most people land in the late 40s and early 50s, not the late 30s. So if you're standing at 40 looking around and thinking, shouldn't I have arrived by now? You haven't missed the peak. You're still climbing toward it. That one fact alone quietly removes a lot of pressure people didn't need to be carrying. But here's the twist. Two people can earn the exact same income and end up in completely different financial futures, which means income by itself was never the real predictor. Something else determines what that income turns into. To understand why, you have to stop thinking about income as just a paycheck and start thinking about where that paycheck comes from. There's a concept economists use called human capital. It's not your salary. It's the thing that produces your salary, your skills, your reputation, your network, your ability to solve problems other people can't. Your income is just the visible output of that asset. And like any asset, it can still be growing at 40, even if it doesn't feel like it. Some of the most well-known career stories prove this. Julia Child didn't publish her first cookbook until she was 49. Vera Wang didn't design her first wedding dress until 40, after her figure skating career ended and a magazine job didn't pan out. Neither of them was behind. They were mid-build. The world just didn't see the asset yet. And if you graduated into a bad economy, 2008, 2020, take your pick. There's a real, well-documented effect for that too. It's sometimes called scarring. Entering the workforce during a downturn can suppress earnings for years afterward, not because of anything you did wrong, but because of when you happen to start the clock. That's not a character flaw. That's timing. And timing isn't something willpower fixes. So if it's not the size of your paycheck, and it's not even purely the size of your skill set, what is it? Because here's the uncomfortable part. You could hand two people the exact same salary, the exact same resume, the exact same starting point, and one of them still ends up financially secure while the other doesn't. Something else is doing the deciding, something almost nobody talks about because it doesn't show up on a resume, a pay stub, or a bank statement. Same salary, same resume, same starting point, and still one person ends up secure and the other doesn't. So it's not the paycheck, and it's not even the skill set behind the paycheck, which means the thing that actually decides your financial future isn't something you earn. It's something you do every single month, whether you're paying attention or not. There's a term for this in finance, the behavior gap. A researcher named Carl Richards coined it after noticing something strange. Investors, on average, earn less than the very funds they're invested in, not because the funds perform badly, because the humans inside them kept panic selling on the way down and buying back in on the way up. The fund did fine. The person using it didn't. Let that sink in for a second. The investment wasn't the problem. The finger on the button was. And this shows up in smaller, sneakier ways too, the way you mentally sort your own money. Behavioral economist Richard Thaler calls it mental accounting, treating $1 in your vacation fund as somehow different from $1 in your checking account, even though money doesn't actually care what folder you put it in. Learning to treat your money as one connected system instead of a dozen separate little buckets. That's not a personality trait. That's a milestone. And it's one almost nobody puts on a checklist. Because here's the uncomfortable pattern hiding underneath Anna and Ben, underneath the net worth gap, underneath all of it. The people who end up okay aren't the ones with the highest willpower. They're the ones who removed willpower from the equation entirely. Think of it like a machine. Paycheck comes in. A slice moves to retirement automatically. A slice moves to investing automatically. Bills get paid automatically. The person isn't making a disciplined choice every single month. There's no moment of temptation to resist because the money is already gone before it ever felt like theirs to spend. That's the actual milestone, not a dollar figure. A machine that runs whether you're motivated that week or not. And here's a strange little detail that makes this whole idea feel a lot less intimidating. The 401k, the thing tens of millions of people now build their entire retirement around, wasn't even designed on purpose. It was a quirk in the 1978 tax code discovered almost by accident by a benefits consultant looking for a loophole. Nobody sat down and engineered the perfect retirement system. It got stumbled into, which means the version of personal finance you're comparing yourself to isn't some flawless blueprint everyone else already figured out. It's a patchwork. Everyone's improvising. So if your system runs without you having to fight yourself every month, congratulations. You've already hit the milestone that predicts more than your salary, your resume, or your job title ever could. But there's a catch. A machine like that only works as long as nothing knocks it over. So what happens when life doesn't cooperate? A layoff, a diagnosis, one bad month that turns into 6. Does the whole system collapse the second something goes wrong? That's the milestone almost everyone skips, right up until the moment they desperately wish they hadn't. Remember that thing I promised you at the very beginning, the metric that beats your salary, beats your net worth, beats your job title, and almost nobody ever looks at it. This is it. Because here's the uncomfortable truth about the machine we just built. The automated paycheck, the retirement slice, the investing slice, the bills that pay themselves, all of it works beautifully. Right up until the moment life doesn't cooperate. A layoff, a diagnosis, a car accident on a random Tuesday, One bad month that quietly turns into 6. And here's the part almost nobody wants to think about. Most people build the engine and never once ask what happens if the engine gets hit. Start with the boring one, because boring is exactly why it works. An emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of expenses, sitting somewhere you can actually reach it. Not invested, not growing, just there. It sounds unglamorous because it is. Nobody brags about their emergency fund at a dinner party, but here's the so what. A family with 6 months set aside doesn't have to panic, sell their investments the week someone loses a job. They just live off the buffer and let the machine keep running underneath them, untouched. That's the entire difference between a bad year and a lost decade. Now here's the stat that catches people off guard. Most people in their 30s and 40s worry about life insurance, what happens to their family if they die. Reasonable. But statistically, you're far more likely to face a different problem first. Roughly 1 in 4 20-year-olds today will become disabled before they reach retirement age. Not die. Become unable to work, which means the risk most people are quietly underprotected against isn't the dramatic one. It's the everyday one, the one that doesn't come with a funeral, just a missing paycheck and bills that don't pause to wait for you. And then there's the milestone people avoid for a completely different reason. Not because it's expensive, but because it's uncomfortable. A will, an estate plan. Nobody wants to sit down and think about it. But skipping it doesn't make the risk disappear. It just hands the decision to a courtroom instead of to the people you'd actually want making it. Here's a strange little detail that makes all of this feel less like some modern financial industry invention. Risk pooling. People banding together to absorb each other's bad luck. Goes back to Babylonian traders thousands of years ago, insuring their shipments against loss before setting sail. This isn't a sales gimmick someone invented to scare you into buying a policy. It's one of the oldest ideas in human cooperation. Humans have always understood that surviving bad luck is a team sport, so now you actually have all 5. Net worth, debt, income, behavior, and this, the invisible one, the one that protects everything else you just built. But here's the question that's probably sitting in the back of your mind right now, and it's a fair one. What if your life didn't follow any of this? What if you're not on this path at all because of debt that wasn't your fault, or a setback nobody warned you about, or a starting line that was never leveled to begin with? That's not a loophole in everything we just covered. Let's say none of this fits you, not because you didn't try, because life didn't ask permission before it rearranged everything. Maybe you're carrying student debt that has nothing to do with bad decisions and everything to do with the year you were born. Maybe you're a first-generation earner with no inherited safety net, no family down payment, no one to call when the car breaks down. Maybe the zip code you grew up in added a decade to every financial milestone on this list before you even opened your first bank account. That's not a character flaw. That's just the starting line wasn't level. It never was. And it's not only where you started. Sometimes it's what happened along the way. A divorce that split everything you'd built in half. An illness that drained a decade of savings in 18 months. A layoff that hit at the exact wrong time. Years spent caregiving for a parent, a kid, a partner, while your own plan sat frozen, untouched, waiting for a version of you that had time to spare. None of that shows up on the milestone checklist, and none of it means you failed the test. Here's something that might surprise you, though. Even the people who look like they're ahead don't feel finished either. The FIRE community, people obsessively optimizing to retire decades early, will tell you the same thing almost word for word. Hitting the number doesn't turn off the anxiety. The goalposts just move. There's always a bigger number, a scarier what if, a reason it's not quite enough yet, which tells you something important. This was never really a race with a finish line. Everyone, the person behind, the person ahead, the person who thinks they've already won, is running the same lap at a different pace, and nobody actually crosses a tape at the end. So if the starting point doesn't decide the outcome, what does? Here's the number that matters more than almost anything else in this video. Start putting away $1,000 a month at 40. Just $1,000. At a historical average return by 65, that becomes roughly $950,000. Not from a lump sum, not from an inheritance, not from getting lucky on one stock. From 25 ordinary years of a habit running quietly in the background. Read that again, because it matters. 40 isn't the year the math stops working. It's the year with the most math still left to happen. And if you want proof that starting late isn't some rare exception, look at the people whose names are already stitched into the world you live in. Colonel Sanders was in his 60s, broke, living off Social Security, when he started franchising fried chicken out of the trunk of his car. Ray Kroc was 52, selling milkshake machines, not a business owner, when he saw a small burger stand in California and turned it into McDonald's. Neither of them was early. Both of them are on money you've probably spent this week. So no, a rough starting point, a life event that knocked you sideways, a decade that didn't go the way you planned. None of that is a loophole that disqualifies you from everything we've covered. It's not the exception to the rule. It might actually be the whole point of it. Because if the starting line doesn't decide the outcome, then something else must. Something that has nothing to do with where you began and everything to do with where you're headed right now. So here's what this all comes down to. 5 milestones: net worth, debt, income, behavior, risk management. And if you've been quietly checking yourself against each one, here's the thing you probably noticed. Not one of them was actually about a number. They were all about direction. Net worth wasn't, do you have $547,400? It was, is the number moving up or is it stuck? Debt wasn't, do you have any? It was, is it building you or draining you? Income wasn't, how big is the paycheck? It was, is the asset behind it still growing? Behavior wasn't, are you disciplined? It was, does the machine run without you? And risk management wasn't, are you rich enough to feel safe? It was, are you protected from the one bad month that could undo everything else? 5 different milestones. One identical question hiding underneath every single one of them. Not, where are you? Where are you headed? That's the whole trick. Nobody tells you about turning 40. It was never a finish line. It was never the moment the scorekeeper walks over and hands you a grade. It's a checkpoint, the first real one, a place where you get to stop, look at the trajectory you're actually on, and adjust it while you've still got 25 years of runway left to bend the curve. 2 people can be standing in the exact same financial spot at 40. One of them is sliding backward. The other is climbing. From the outside on paper today, they look identical. Give it 10 years, and they won't be in the same universe. That's not a metaphor. That's just what a trajectory does if you leave it alone long enough. So if you want the 5 milestones in one breath, is your net worth moving in the right direction, even slowly? Is your debt building something or quietly eating it? Is your income still attached to a growing skill set? Does your money move on autopilot instead of relying on your willpower? And if life throws a punch tomorrow, do you actually have something absorbing the hit? You don't need a yes on all 5 today. Nobody does. You need the trend line pointing up. There's an old line that gets repeated so often it's almost lost its meaning. So let it land one more time. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. 40 isn't too late to plant it. 40 is just the day you finally noticed the ground. So now you know exactly where you actually stand, not against some fantasy net worth, not against your coworker's 401k, not against Kevin's Reddit post from someone with $1.2 million who still feels behind. But knowing where you stand isn't the same as knowing what to do about it tonight. Because here's the trap. 5 milestones can feel like 5 homework assignments. And if you walk away from this video trying to fix all 5 at once, you won't fix any of them. So there's one last thing, the smallest, most specific step in this entire video, and it's coming right now. Here it is. The The smallest, most specific step in this entire video. Not fix your finances, not go build an emergency fund, pay off debt, automate your investing, and get disability insurance by Friday. That's not a plan. That's a way to feel worse by Saturday. So don't do all 5. Pick one. Look back at the 5 milestones: net worth, debt, income, behavior, risk management, and be honest with yourself about which one is quietly the weakest. Not the scariest, the weakest. The one where, if you're honest, you already know the answer before you finish reading the sentence. Maybe it's that you've never actually calculated your real net worth. Assets minus liabilities on paper in 10 minutes tonight. Maybe it's that you have no idea whether your debt is leverage or drag, and you've just been feeling vaguely bad about all of it equally. Maybe it's that your money isn't on autopilot yet. Nothing moves anywhere unless you personally move it. Maybe it's that 3 to 6 month buffer that doesn't exist yet, sitting quietly at 0. Whatever it is, that's tonight's assignment. One milestone, one small, specific action. Not the whole system, just the weakest link in it. Because here's the thing, nobody tells you about trajectories. They don't change from one heroic month. They change from one habit that outlasts your motivation. You don't need a perfect year. You need a slightly better Tuesday repeated. You're not behind. You're not late. You're not the only one standing here doing the math and feeling your stomach drop a little. You're just at the checkpoint. And now you know what it's actually measuring. Direction, not position. Trend line, not scoreboard. That's it. That's the whole video. Now, if you've got the "Am I going to be okay by 40" question handled, there's a version of this same anxiety that shows up again 20 years later, and it hits differently. It's not, "Am I saving enough?" It's, "When I actually retire, which one of these 3 people am I going to be?" So go watch the 3 financial levels of retirement: rich, comfortable, and broke. Because the checkpoint you just passed isn't the last one. It's just the first one you're actually prepared for.